a lot of outsiders have a hard time wrapping their head around Gamergate, and maybe a lot of people who were involved in the conversations at the time do too, because on the one hand you have like these corrupt games journalists, the other hand you have like the people who are advocating for censorship, or who are, and then on the third hand you have people who are talking about like social justice in their articles or in YouTube videos in gaming. And like this like weird conflagration of these three things that most people would view as like kind of separate. So how did all three of these things merge into one aspect?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I think you do hit on a very salient point here that it was kind of like this coming together of all these different points all at once. And to me, it does feel like it was through that ideological lens of, at least that's how I came to view it as I was making my videos, because I was trying to make sense of what was happening to our games industry as I was making those videos. And you can see, or I can see in hindsight, that I was starting from a, well, that's kind of this neo-feminism, and then it was like, and then I started to see it as a third wave feminism that was coming in. And then I started to see it once the race came into it, right? When Anita Sarkeesian started talking about um, not your exotic fantasy, and started talking about the race problem that apparently gaming suddenly had, and it was just like this weird progressive uh, tide that seemed to be swinging in to criticize everything that was going on in games. So it felt to me like it was already there, and that all of these other kind of elements, the corruption, the collusion, the censorship in particular, were kind of in the wake of that ideological tide. Like the censorship to me felt like it was mostly in line with those ideologies, right? It was usually about, oh, we need to censor things that we find from Japan a little bit too sexy or something, and so that kind of fit in with the neo-feminist kind of agenda. So it felt to me like they were interrelated on ideological grounds. In fact, going back to Anita Sarkeesian, he said in her Mashable interview in 2017 that it was never for her about video games. It was always about social justice. And when she said that, I'm like, oh, everything snaps into place now, right? You really didn't care about games this whole time. You cared about your religious viewpoints on social justice and advocating for those. And to me, Gamergate was kind of like, oh, the video game world started to recognize this push for the what we now recognize as the woke religion, was one of the first battles, or the first places where there was an evangelical movement, was there around Gamergate, and the gaming press was evangelizing the woke religion.
Is there something wrong with someone who's not a gamer coming in and criticizing games?
No, I don't think there's a problem with that at all, except that it's kind of an uninformed position, and I think that people need to call that out. What I objected to about Sarkeesian's position was she kept saying that she cared about games, and that she was a lifetime gamer. She kept coming around to like, oh, I just really care about games. It wasn't until she finally came out in that Mashable interview that what people have been saying all along, it's not really about games, right? It's about this social justice agenda. And so she was open with that, and that to me was the issue. Was it was almost like Anita was looking for a social justice cause, and video games happened to fit the bill. And so she came from the outside to come in as an elitist, as somebody who's well educated in her own mind, to tell the rest of the world what's wrong with games and gaming culture and the white men that dominate it. And I think people just were like, no, you can't do that and have people take you seriously. And then they were surprised when most of the press did seem to take Miss Sarkeesian's criticisms very seriously, and she was on ABC News and the Colbert Report and everywhere else, even though she had a hard time naming, more than two or three games.
I'm sorry, I'm just trying to think about how I'm going to push back on this because I I am consider myself a fan of synthwave music to like some modest degree. Like I have some degree of interest in listening to this kind of music, this sort of like 1980s retro cyberpunky
Yeah,
music.
yeah.
And I don't know hardly anything about the industry whatsoever. I could like name a couple songs that I like. Um, if I were to, and like whatever, you can call me a synthwave fan. Maybe Anita thought of herself in the same way in gaming. I've played a few games before. I had a little bit of a fun time with it, whatever. And now let's say that I decide, you know what, I'm going to go and make a series of videos where I criticize synthwave music. And
Hmm.
maybe I'm not like a real synthwave fan or whatever. But does that mean I don't have the ability to do research, to learn more, and to criticize it, even as someone who is only moderately invested in that culture?
No, I think that you would be that's perfectly fine, to come in. My objections about Sarkeesian's criticisms of gaming wasn't so much that she was an outsider, it was that it was from an ideological standpoint as an outsider. So if you came into the synthwave world, taking your example, and said, I'm going to come in, I don't really know much about synthwave, but I'm going to pick an industry, synthwave, and now I'm going to take it apart from a standpoint of why it's sexist and racist. I'm not sure what it is yet, but I'm going to find it. And that's what I think people uh, picked up on, was it wasn't coming from a position of love. It wasn't coming from a position of I want to improve things necessarily. I mean, maybe there was some of it, but it was primarily motivated by an elitist standpoint of I need to. What does she say? Everything is sexist, everything is racist, everything is homophobic, and you need to point it all out.
Yeah.
And that attitude is not a good place to be in, I think, if you want to present well-rounded criticism. I'm not saying she shouldn't have been there at all. I'm just saying it was very narrow. And it was unfortunate that that narrow perspective was taken as the entire perspective, as some sort of robust analysis, when it really was just a very narrow look into a very few subset of games.
Yeah, to clarify though, because I made the same mistake once. Uh, Anita Sarkeesian, when she said that everything is racist, everything is sexist, everything is homophobic, you have to point it all out. She said, in the full context of that, she said, "That's how I used to be." Not that that's her current
Yeah,
view when she said that.
yeah, I remember several people kind of saying, "Hey, when you look at the whole quote," and I went, and I've looked at that quote in context a few times, and I guess it's not really worth arguing too much about the quote, but it seemed to me that she was making the case that that was her enlightened view, that that she had arrived at a point where this is what I realized I needed to do, and then over time, in context, I've realized that I shouldn't do that so much, but I still believe that that's the case, right? That everything's sexist, racist, and homophobic, but that I've learned I have to not call it out so much because it's not it's not as well received. In other words, she was saying that she believed, in my opinion, that she really believed everything's sexist, racist, and homophobic, but that she had learned that calling it all out aggressively was not the best way to get people to engage with her ideas. That's how I thought that quote was intended.
Hi, I'm Tachyon Blue. Thank you for watching another one of my GamerGate book video segments. Altogether, I've interviewed over 70 people involved with GamerGate, and I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter campaign in the coming weeks. So please, I need your support to help make this project a reality. I'm turning these 70 plus interviews into a multi volume series of books, the first volume of which is already completed. And so I'd like you to please stay tuned for more information about the Kickstarter. And if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and comment. More updates will be coming in the near future. Thank you, and take care.